The first contact wasn't what we expected. No grand ships descending from the clouds. No worldwide broadcast interrupting every television channel. No ambassadors stepping onto the White House lawn with a message of peace. Instead, it was just a small probe that crashed in the fields of rural Nebraska, its alien architecture unmistakable even to the farmer who found it while checking on his corn. The probe wasn't meant for us to find. That much became clear when the military scientists began to study it. This was a surveillance device designed to observe from a distance. Someone had been watching us, and they hadn't wanted us to know. 3 days after the discovery, every astronomical observatory on Earth detected the same anomaly, a massive energy reading at the edge of our solar system. Whatever had sent the probe now knew we found it. The countdown had begun. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the video feed, displaying the artifact now housed in the underground facility beneath Cheyenne Mountain. After 15 years in the Space Force, she thought she'd seen everything. She was wrong. "They're calling it the Andromeda incident," said Dr. Richard Hayes, the astrophysicist who had been studying the probe since its recovery. His eyes were sunken from lack of sleep, his normally crisp lab coat wrinkled from days of continuous wear. Based on the trajectory analysis, the probe originated from the Andromeda galaxy. "That's over 2 million light-years away," Sarah said, frowning at the data scrolling across her tablet. "How is that possible?" Hayes shrugged. "The same way they're now amassing a fleet at the border of our system. They've mastered some form of faster-than-light travel that breaks all our understanding of physics." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. If these aliens could traverse galaxies, what chance did humanity have? "What's bothering me," Sarah said, tapping her stylus against the table, "is why they're afraid." Hayes looked up sharply. "Afraid? What makes you think they're afraid?" "This probe was designed for stealth observation. They didn't want us to know they were watching. And now that we found it, they've mobilized immediately. That's not the behavior of a confident species making first contact. That's fear-based reaction." General Wilson, who had been silently listening from the head of the table, nodded slowly. "Captain Chen has a point. You don't send surveillance before an invasion unless you're uncertain about what you're facing." "But that's absurd," Hayes countered. "We've barely left our own planet. We're technological infants compared to them." "Maybe they know something we don't," Sarah said quietly. "About us." The thought hung in the air like an invisible weight. The breakthrough came a week later, when the team finally managed to access the probe's data storage. The alien language was indecipherable, but the images were clear enough. Recordings of Earth throughout human history. The probe hadn't just been here for years. It had been here for millennia. "They've been watching us evolve," Hayes whispered as they viewed footage of ancient civilizations rising and falling. "Since before we built the pyramids." But it was the final segment of data that chilled everyone in the room. It showed a simulation, Earth's future, based on the aliens' predictive models. It depicted humans spreading across the galaxy, then beyond, evolving and adapting at a rate that seemed impossible. And everywhere humans went in the simulation, other species vanished. "They're not afraid of what we are," General Wilson said, his face pale in the blue light of the projection. "They're afraid of what we're becoming." The first alien transmission arrived the next day. A simple binary message that the computers translated after hours of processing. "Quarantine violation. DETTE. Containment protocol. Line ATD." Sarah's mind raced as she processed what this meant. They've had us in a quarantine. The Sol system is their version of a biohazard containment facility, and we just broke the seal by finding their probe. The global response was chaotic but swift. For the first time in history, all nations united against a common threat. Military forces mobilized worldwide. Scientists worked around the clock to understand the alien technology and find a defense. Civilians prepared for the worst, stocking supplies and building shelters. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something fundamental. If these Andromedans had been watching Earth for thousands of years, why hadn't they eliminated humanity long ago, when we were even less advanced? Why maintain a quarantine rather than simply sterilize the threat? The answer came to her during a sleepless night reviewing the probe's data. One sequence showed the Andromedans attempting to land on Earth during the Cretaceous period, only to be decimated by unknown pathogens. More footage revealed similar failed attempts throughout Earth's history. They can't survive here, she told the Emergency Council the next morning. Something about Earth's biosphere is lethal to them. That's why they've been observing from a distance. That's why they established a quarantine rather than invading. Then why are they coming now? The Secretary of Defense asked. Because we found their probe. Because they think we might have accessed their technology, learned their weaknesses. Because they believe we might now be able to leave the quarantine zone and reach their worlds. As the alien fleet approached Mars, humanity prepared for its first interstellar war. The odds seemed impossible. Our primitive spacecraft and weapons against beings who could cross galaxies. But Sarah knew something the aliens didn't. Humans thrived on impossible odds. In her quarters, Sarah studied the final simulation from the alien probe once more, the one showing humanity's unstoppable spread across the cosmos. The aliens had created this model as a nightmare scenario, their worst fear realized. But to Sarah, it looked like humanity's destiny. The countdown to first engagement had begun. In 72 hours, the alien fleet would reach Earth orbit. No one knew if humanity would survive the week. But one thing was certain. The Andromedans were about to learn why quarantining humans had been both their wisest and most terrible mistake. Sarah woke to the sound of her alarm at 500 hours. She'd managed barely 3 hours of sleep, but it would have to be enough. The world's military forces had established a joint command center in the same facility housing the alien probe, and representatives from every space-capable nation were gathering for what might be humanity's last war council. "We've detected movement from the Andromedan fleet," announced Admiral Thomas as soon as Sarah entered the command center. The large display screen showed the positions of the alien vessels, now passing the orbit of Mars. They've accelerated their approach. New ETA is 58 hours. Sarah studied the formation. They're spreading out. Encirclement tactics. "Looks that way," said Lieutenant Commander Diane Park, the tactical officer assigned to Sarah's team. Park had been a brilliant strategist during the orbital skirmishes of the Mid-East crisis 5 years ago. Now her expertise would be tested against an enemy no human had ever faced. "If I were them, I'd be establishing firing positions to target our major population centers and military installations simultaneously." "Do we have any updates on potential weapons capabilities?" Sarah asked. Hayes, looking even more haggard than the day before, pulled up a new set of readings on his tablet. Based on the energy signatures we're detecting, they appear to have directed energy weapons far beyond our current technology. They could potentially glass the entire surface of the planet within hours if they wanted to. Then why haven't they? General Wilson asked the question that had been gnawing at all of them. If they have that kind of firepower, and they consider us a threat, why not just sterilize Earth from a safe distance? "The quarantine," Sarah said, the pieces clicking together in her mind. "Whatever it is about Earth that's dangerous to them, they don't want to risk releasing it into space." Hayes nodded slowly. "Like how we handle dangerous pathogens. You don't blow up a containment facility. That just spreads the contagion. So they need a precision strike," Park concluded. "Eliminate the humans without damaging the containment system." Sarah turned to the representatives from various nations who had been listening to the exchange with growing concern. "We need to know exactly what it is about Earth that they fear. That's our advantage." The Chinese delegate, General Liu, spoke up. "Captain Chen, we've been analyzing the probe's materials. The alloys used in its construction begin to deteriorate when exposed to certain bacteria common in Earth's soil. Biological warfare." The Russian delegate looked skeptical. "Against an enemy that has crossed galaxies. Advanced technology doesn't equal biological immunity," Hayes argued. "Think about it. They evolved in a completely different ecosystem. Our microbes, our viruses, even our atmosphere could be lethal to them. Sarah remembered the images from the probe, the failed Andromedan landing attempts throughout Earth's history. That's why they've never tried to establish a colony here. That's why they've only observed from orbit or sent unmanned probes. Then we need to take the fight to space, Wilson said firmly. Every satellite we have, every weapon platform, every spacecraft, we position them to intercept. With all due respect, General, our most advanced military satellites would be like throwing rocks at a tank. Park said, we need something they won't expect. Sarah walked closer to the display showing the approaching fleet. They've been studying us for thousands of years, but they've been doing it from a distance. What if they've misunderstood something fundamental about humans? Like what? Hayes asked. Like our adaptability, our unpredictability. Sarah turned to face the room. Those simulations showed humans spreading across the galaxy because we adapt faster than any species they've encountered. We solve problems in ways they can't predict. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Every nation contributed resources to what was now being called Operation Terra Shield. Russia and China deployed their kinetic orbital platforms. The European Space Agency repositioned their satellites to create a detection grid. The U.S. Space Force prepared their small fleet of experimental spacecraft, originally designed for Mars missions, but now retrofitted with weapons systems. But Sarah knew it wouldn't be enough. The Andromedan fleet outgunned them by orders of magnitude. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Abigail Foster, a microbiologist who had been studying the probe's deterioration, requested an urgent meeting with the command team. We've been approaching this all wrong, Foster explained, her excitement evident despite her exhaustion. We've been thinking about what Earth organisms might do to the Andromedans. But what about what Earth organisms have already done to their technology? She pulled up microscope images of the probe's outer hull. These patterns of deterioration aren't random. Certain bacteria in our atmosphere are actually consuming their materials, breaking down molecular bonds in their alloys. So Earth itself is a weapon? Park asked. In a manner of speaking, Foster confirmed. But more importantly, I've identified several compounds in our atmosphere that accelerate this process. If we could deliver a concentrated dose to their ships. Sarah felt the first glimmer of real hope. We'd need a delivery system that could reach orbit. The Mars mission prototypes, Wilson suggested immediately. They were designed to release payloads into the Martian atmosphere. For the first time since the crisis began, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. We don't need to outgun them. We just need to make them vulnerable. As the scientists worked to weaponize Earth's atmosphere, Sarah spent hours studying the probe's recordings of human history. Something about the way the Andromedans had been observing Earth bothered her. The footage seemed selectively focused on human conflicts, on wars and weapons development. They've been studying our capacity for violence, she realized. That's what they fear most about us. Hayes looked up from his workstation. Not just violence, our capacity to direct it, to strategize. Look at these segments they've highlighted. The development of nuclear weapons, the space race, the AI revolution. They fear our potential, Sarah whispered. What we might become. The warning klaxons cut through her thoughts. The main screen flashed red as new data came in from the outer detection grid. We've got movement, Park announced, her voice tense. The Andromedan fleet has changed formation. They're accelerating again. Sarah watched as the alien ships arranged themselves into a new pattern, one that made her blood run cold. This wasn't an encirclement anymore. They're forming an attack vector, she said. They're coming in hot. The new ETA flashed on screen. 24 hours to engagement. The Andromedan quarantine was about to be forcibly reinforced, and humanity's time was running out. We need to accelerate the mission timeline, General Wilson announced, his voice steady despite the growing tension in the command center. All spacecraft need to be ready for launch in 12 hours. Sarah studied the tactical display, watching the Andromedan ships moving with perfect precision, like a single organism rather than a fleet. "They're coordinating too perfectly," she said. "No communication lag, no individual ship variations. It's like they're all extensions of a single mind." "A hive consciousness," Hayes suggested, looking up from his analysis of the probe's communication systems. "Or something close to it," Sarah replied, "which could be another advantage for us. Individual human adaptability versus collective thinking. We're unpredictable. They're unified, but potentially less flexible." The Joint Command Center had become a hive of its own. Scientists, military personnel, and engineers working with desperate intensity. The plan taking shape was audacious, perhaps suicidal, but it was the only chance they had. Dr. Foster burst into the room, clutching a tablet with fresh data. "We've done it," she exclaimed. "We've synthesized a compound that accelerates the bacterial degradation of their materials by a factor of 50. We're calling it Breakdown Alpha." "How much can we produce in the next 12 hours?" Sarah asked. "Enough to equip the 6 Mars prototypes," Foster replied. "But delivering it will be the challenge. Our simulations suggest it needs to be released directly into their ship ventilation systems to be most effective." Park looked up sharply from her station. "You're talking about a boarding action against ships that can cross galaxies." "Not boarding," Sarah said slowly, an idea forming. "Infiltration." She pulled up the probe data showing the Andromedan ships. "Look at these intake valves. They're designed to collect and analyze space particles. If we could position our delivery vehicles in their path, they'd suck our compound right into their systems," Wilson finished, a grim smile crossing his face. "But we'd need pilots willing to fly directly into the enemy formation." "I'll lead the mission," Sarah said without hesitation. The next 10 hours were a blur of preparation. The prototype spacecraft, originally designed for Mars atmospheric research, were hastily retrofitted with delivery systems for Breakdown Alpha. Each would carry enough of the compound to contaminate several Andromedan vessels. In the briefing room, Sarah faced the 5 other pilots who had volunteered for what many were calling a suicide mission. They were the best Earth had to offer: veteran test pilots and combat veterans from various nations' space programs. "Our primary objective is to position ourselves in the path of their intake systems," Sarah explained, showing the approach vectors they'd calculated. "We release the compound, and their own systems will do the rest. Secondary objective is to gather as much intelligence as possible on their weaponry and defenses." "And survival?" asked Commander Zhang, the Chinese pilot assigned to the mission. Sarah met his gaze directly. "That's the tertiary objective." No one flinched. They all understood the stakes. As the launch countdown began, Sarah took a moment alone in the ready room. She strapped on her flight suit, checking each seal meticulously. Her thoughts drifted to the simulation she'd seen in the probe data. Humans spreading unstoppably across the cosmos. Was that really humanity's future? Or would the Andromedans end that possibility today? Captain Chen. She turned to see Hayes standing in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in the restricted area. "Doctor, shouldn't you be in the command center? I wanted to give you this personally." He handed her a small data drive. "I've been analyzing their communication patterns. There are recurring sequences that might be commands or identification codes. If you can get close enough to use them, it might buy us some confusion." Sarah finished, pocketing the drive. "Thank you." Hayes hesitated, then added, "The probe data showed something else. In all their simulations of human expansion, there was one constant, a specific human adaptation that terrified them more than any other." "What was it?" "Our ability to understand and use the technology of other species. They call it the assimilation threat. No other species they've encountered can do it as quickly as humans." Sarah absorbed this information, seeing its immediate tactical value. "So they'll be watching for signs we've reverse-engineered their tech." "Exactly. They expect it." Hayes looked at her intently. "Which means you could use that expectation against them." The final preparations were completed as the Andromedan fleet crossed the lunar orbit. Earth's limited orbital defenses were already engaging, but as expected, they were proving ineffective against the advanced alien shields. Operation Terra Shield is a go, Wilson's voice announced over the comm system as Sarah strapped into the pilot's seat of her craft, designated Alpha 1. May God be with you all. The 6 prototype ships launched simultaneously from different facilities around the globe, using the chaos of the orbital defense engagement as cover. Sarah's craft shuddered as it accelerated through the atmosphere, pushing her back into her seat with crushing force. Alpha Team, form up, she ordered once they reached low Earth orbit. Comm check. 5 acknowledgments came in rapid succession. Remember, maintain comm silence once we approach their formation. Use tight beam laser comms only if absolutely necessary. The view outside her viewport was both beautiful and terrifying. Earth spread out below, a blue marble against the blackness of space. Ahead, the Andromedan fleet hung like a constellation of ominous stars, their hulls reflecting the sun's light in ways that seemed subtly wrong to human eyes. Picking up energy spikes, reported Alpha 3, piloted by Commander Zhang. They're powering weapon systems. The first blasts from the alien fleet struck Earth's orbital defense platforms, vaporizing them instantly. The shockwaves rippled through space, buffeting the small human craft despite their distance. Maintain course, Sarah ordered, her voice steady despite the display of overwhelming power. Remember, we're too small to register as threats on their sensors. Just 6 more pieces of space debris until we're right on top of them. As they approached the outer ships of the Andromedan formation, Sarah activated the specialized sensors Dr. Foster had installed. They immediately began mapping the complex system of intake valves and external sensors dotting the alien hulls. Alpha 4, adjust your approach vector 3 degrees port, Sarah instructed. You're drifting out of position. Copy that, came the tense reply from the Russian pilot. They were now less than 10 kilometers from the nearest Andromedan vessel, close enough to see the intricate patterns etched into its hull. The alien ship dwarfed their small craft, extending for what seemed like kilometers in every direction. Suddenly, alarms blared in Sarah's cockpit. We're being scanned. Alpha 2 reported urgently. Hold position, Sarah ordered, her heart racing. Don't break formation. She watched as her sensor display showed the Andromedans scanning beams passing over their ships. This was the moment of truth. Either their stealth systems would mask the true nature of their craft, or they were about to be vaporized. The scanning beams moved on, sweeping past them toward Earth. They still think we're debris. Sarah breathed. Prepare to deploy on my mark. Alpha 2 and 3, target the vessel to starboard. Alpha 4 and 5, take the port side capital ship. Alpha 6 and I will take the command vessel. As they maneuvered into their final positions, Sarah noticed something strange. The Andromedan ships were beginning to adjust their formation, opening gaps that hadn't existed before. They're creating a corridor, she realized aloud. A direct path to Earth's surface. Over the emergency channel, Admiral Thomas's voice crackled through with unprecedented urgency. Alpha Team, be advised. We're detecting a massive energy buildup in the Andromedan fleet. All indications suggest they're preparing to fire their main weapons directly at multiple targets on Earth's surface. Sarah made a split-second decision. Change of plans. All units converge on the command ship. We hit them with everything we've got before they can fire. As the 6 small human ships altered course toward the center of the Andromedan formation, Sarah felt a strange calm descend over her. Everything had led to this moment. Humanity's desperate gamble against an enemy that had feared them from afar for millennia. The massive Andromedan command ship loomed ahead, its weapon systems visibly charging with energy that distorted the very space around it. They had less than 2 minutes before those weapons would unleash destruction on Earth unlike anything humans had ever witnessed. For Earth, Sarah whispered as she activated the final approach sequence. Let's show them exactly why they were right to fear us. The 6 human ships accelerated toward the Andromedan command vessel, pushing their engines beyond safe parameters. Sarah's craft shuddered violently, threatening to tear itself apart as she led the formation into what appeared to be a suicidal charge. Alpha 5, you're drifting out of position, she called over the comm. Negative, Captain, came the reply from Commander Rodriguez. My controls aren't responding. Some things. His transmission cut off abruptly as his ship veered sharply away from the formation, then stabilized on a completely different vector. Alpha 5, report, Sarah demanded, but there was no response. Captain, I'm experiencing the same issue, Alpha 2 reported, voice tight with tension. It's like something's taken control of my navigation systems. One by one, each of the human ships found themselves pulled out of formation, their controls overridden by an external force. Sarah fought her own controls as her ship began to deviate from its attack run. It's some kind of tractor technology, Alpha 6 suggested. They've locked onto us. But Sarah realized something was wrong with that assessment. The Andromedan ships weren't pulling them in for destruction or capture. Instead, their small fleet was being precisely repositioned into a new formation. They're not attacking us, she said, watching as her ship settled into a stable position with the others, arranged in a perfect hexagon. They're organizing us. The comm system in her cockpit suddenly crackled to life with a sound unlike anything she'd ever heard, a harmonic resonance that somehow formed words in her mind rather than her ears. Breach protocol of HFY assessment COMPLET. Sarah's blood ran cold. The Andromedans were communicating directly with them. They're scanning our ships, Alpha 3 reported. They must have detected the breakdown Alpha. Sarah expected immediate destruction, but instead, the voice continued. QUAR, NTINITY, Breachy, 3 LEVEL, UPGRATED. Species designation, human. NEUCLA Sci-Fi. Symbiotic AD8PTERs. A new image appeared on Sarah's main display, not transmitted through any system she recognized, but somehow projected directly onto her screen. It showed the bacterial compound they had created, but from a perspective she hadn't considered. The Andromedans had analyzed Breakdown Alpha and recognized something in its structure that deeply alarmed them. Dr. Foster, Sarah called over the emergency channel back to Earth. They've detected the compound. They're showing us something about it. Are you seeing this? Yes, Foster's voice came back, filled with wonder. Captain, the bacteria we used. The Andromedans are showing us that it's not just degrading their materials. It's adapting to them, incorporating their molecular structure into its own. Hayes's voice broke in. It's evolving in real time to consume their technology. That shouldn't be possible. A chilling realization dawned on Sarah. That's why they quarantined Earth. Not just because our bacteria could harm them, but because Earth life can adapt to and incorporate their advanced technology into its own evolution. The voice resonated again, confirming her suspicion. EAR-8 biological adaptation RAT. Unprecedented. ProGCTD OUT technological ASSIMILET ADON. The massive energy buildup in the Andromedan command ship suddenly dissipated. The weapons weren't powering down. They were being redirected. New energy signatures detected, Alpha 4 reported. They're targeting the moon. Sarah watched in disbelief as beams of coherent energy lanced from the Andromedan fleet toward Earth's satellite. But rather than destroying it, the beams converged on a specific point on the lunar surface. What are they doing? She wondered aloud. The answer came a moment later as her sensors detected something rising from the moon's surface, a structure that had been hidden beneath the regolith, now activated by the Andromedan energy beams. Command, are you seeing this? Sarah asked urgently. Affirmative, came Admiral Thomas's stunned reply. We're detecting a massive artificial structure emerging from the lunar surface. It appears to have been there for thousands of years. The lunar facility, now fully exposed, began to pulse with energy that matched the Andromedan ships. It was clearly their technology, a base they had established in Earth's own backyard millennia ago. It's not just a quarantine, Sarah realized. It's a prison. The harmonic voice returned, louder now. So HFY protocol activated. Turai Mayorai containment compromised. Secondary containment necessary. Before anyone could respond, a shockwave of energy rippled out from the lunar facility, washing over Earth and the surrounding space. Sarah's instruments went haywire, and for a brief moment, she felt a strange pressure in her mind, as if something was trying to communicate directly with her thoughts. When her systems stabilized, the tactical display showed something impossible. A field of energy now surrounded the entire Sol system, extending far beyond Pluto's orbit, a barrier cutting Earth off from the rest of the galaxy. "They've sealed us in," Hayes said over the comm, his voice hollow with shock. "They've created some kind of impenetrable barrier around our entire solar system." "Not just sealed us in," Sarah corrected as new data streamed across her console. "They're accelerating time within the field. Time is passing more quickly inside this barrier than outside." The implications were staggering. The Andromedans hadn't come to destroy humanity. They'd come to contain what they saw as an existential threat in the only way they knew how, by placing the entire Sol system in a time dilation field. "They're giving themselves time," Sarah said quietly. "Time to find a more permanent solution while we're trapped in here." But as she studied the readings more carefully, she noticed something the Andromedans had apparently overlooked. The barrier wasn't just containing Earth, it was reacting to it. The same adaptive properties that Earth bacteria had shown toward Andromedan materials were now manifesting on a system-wide scale. The barrier was adapting. "Captain," Alpha 6 called urgently, "I'm detecting changes in the molecular structure of our hull plating. The barrier energy is being incorporated into the metal alloys." Sarah checked her own ship and confirmed the same phenomenon. The human vessels were absorbing properties from the Andromedan technology. "It's happening to everything in the system," Hayes reported from Earth. "The barrier energy is being assimilated by Earth matter at an atomic level. Our technology is evolving." The Andromedan ships suddenly began to retreat, accelerating away from Earth toward the barrier they had created. "They're running," Alpha 2 observed. "They realize what's happening." Sarah understood their panic. The barrier meant to contain humanity was instead accelerating the very process the Andromedans feared most: humanity's technological assimilation capabilities. By trying to trap Earth, they had inadvertently provided direct contact with their most advanced technology. "They've made a critical miscalculation," Sarah said. "They didn't understand that it's not just our bacteria that can adapt. It's everything from Earth, our technology, our minds, us." As the Andromedan ships approached the barrier, attempting to pass back through to open space, something unexpected happened. The barrier pulsed, and the lead Andromedan vessel froze in place, unable to penetrate its own creation. The harmonic voice returned one last time, tinged with what could only be described as fear. "CONTAINMENTFAILUR. Adaptation. XCEDs pro GC. The present has BCOMEKHEINCUBATOR." Sarah watched as the Andromedans frantically tried to escape, only to find themselves trapped alongside humanity in the very cage they had built. The barrier wasn't just keeping humans in. It was now keeping the Andromedans from escaping what they had created. And in that moment, as the 6 small human ships hovered in formation between two civilizations, Sarah realized that the greatest fear of the Andromedans had just become reality. They hadn't just failed to contain humanity. They had accelerated our evolution. "All ships, return to Earth immediately," came Admiral Thomas's voice, breaking the stunned silence that had fallen over the comm system. "We need to assess the full impact of this barrier." As Sarah piloted her ship back toward the blue planet, she couldn't tear her eyes away from the tactical display, showing the Andromedan vessels now frantically trying to breach their own creation. Their perfect formation had dissolved into chaos. "They're firing on the barrier," Alpha 4 reported. "No effect." "Captain." Hayes's voice came through, tense with excitement. "The readings we're getting from your ships are unprecedented. The molecular structure of your hull plating has already incorporated elements of Andromedan technology. The adaptation rate is exponential." Sarah glanced at her ship's diagnostic panel. Systems that had been pushed beyond their limits during their desperate approach were now operating at efficiencies that shouldn't have been possible. The engines were running cooler. Power output had increased by 30%. "It's not just the ships," Foster added. "The barrier effect is being detected all across Earth. Technology everywhere is evolving." Within hours of their return to the Cheyenne Mountain facility, the full implications had become clear. The Andromedan barrier had created a cascading effect throughout the solar system. Human technology was rapidly incorporating principles from the advanced alien systems, guided somehow by human intuition and creativity. "We're calling it the assimilation wave," Hayes explained to the Emergency Council, his exhaustion forgotten in the face of the greatest scientific discovery in human history. "The barrier is accelerating the development of anything created by humans. Computers are rewriting their own code. Materials are restructuring at the molecular level. And it's happening faster by the hour." "What about biological effects?" General Wilson asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Nothing harmful detected," Foster replied. "Human physiology appears unchanged. The effect seems limited to technology and artificial materials." "For now," Sarah added quietly. The satellite feeds showed the Andromedan fleet still trapped, their attempts to breach the barrier growing increasingly desperate. Occasionally, one of their ships would approach Earth, only to retreat when Earth's newly enhanced defense systems automatically targeted them. "They're afraid to engage us directly now," Park observed. "They can see what's happening to our technology. But we can't stay trapped inside this solar system," the Russian delegate pointed out. "No matter how advanced we become, we're still prisoners." Sarah studied the latest simulation of the barrier. "I don't think that's necessarily true," she said slowly. "Look at how the barrier is changing. It's not just a static field anymore. It's pulsing, developing nodes at specific coordinates." Hayes leaned forward, eyes widening as he analyzed the data. "She's right. The barrier is developing what look like doorways, controlled points of entry and exit," Sarah concluded. "The barrier is adapting to our needs. Or we're adapting it," Hayes suggested, subconsciously directing its evolution. 7 days after the barrier's creation, humanity had advanced technologically by what would have been centuries under normal circumstances. The assimilation wave had transformed every aspect of human technology, from medicine to energy production, from computation to material science, and the Andromedans remained trapped, watching. It was on the 8th day that Sarah made her decision. She requested a private meeting with Admiral Thomas, General Wilson, and the Joint Chiefs. "We need to contact them," she said without preamble. "The Andromedans. We need to talk." "Why would we do that?" Wilson asked. "They tried to imprison us, maybe destroy us." "Because we're still missing something fundamental," Sarah explained. "This barrier, the acceleration effect, it doesn't make sense that they wouldn't have anticipated this outcome. They've been studying us for thousands of years. How could they make such a catastrophic miscalculation?" The military leaders exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Unless," Sarah continued, "this was the plan all along." 2 days later, Sarah found herself once again in the cockpit of her ship, now drastically transformed by the assimilation wave. What had once been a simple Mars prototype now incorporated technology that even Hayes couldn't fully explain. She piloted it alone toward the specified coordinates, a point in space exactly halfway between Earth and the main Andromedan vessel. As she approached the meeting point, she saw the alien craft detach from their fleet. Unlike the massive ships, this was a small vessel, clearly designed for diplomacy rather than warfare. The two ships hovered in the vacuum, facing each other. Sarah had insisted on direct communication, no electronic interfaces that could be manipulated or misunderstood. The airlocks aligned perfectly, creating a sealed corridor between the vessels. Sarah checked her oxygen supply one last time before opening her side. The being that emerged from the Andromedan ship was nothing like what she had expected. Standing only slightly taller than a human, its form was vaguely humanoid, but with distinct differences. Iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors with each movement, eyes that appeared to see in spectrums beyond human comprehension, and most surprisingly, an expression that Sarah could somehow recognize as cautious hope. Captain Sarah Chin, it said, the words forming directly in her mind, just as they had through the ship's communication system. I am emissary Falcon of the Andromedan Collective. You speak English, Sarah observed, maintaining her composure despite the surreal nature of this first official contact. We speak all human languages, the emissary replied. We have studied your kind since you first gathered around fires and looked to the stars. Why? Sarah asked simply. The alien's colors shifted to deeper blues. Because you are the first. The first what? The first species to evolve precisely, as we hoped one would. The first to pass the test. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Test. You're saying this was all deliberate. The quarantine, the barrier, all of it. The universe is dying. Captain Chen, Falcon said, the colors of its skin now pulsing with urgency. Entropy increases. Stars burn out. Galaxies drift apart. The Andromedan Collective has existed for millions of your years, and in all that time, we have sought a solution to the ultimate end. We have searched for a species with the potential to help us solve this final problem. And you think humans are that species? Sarah asked incredulously. We know you are. What you perceive as fear is actually hope. The barrier was not a prison. It was an incubator, as you correctly surmised. A controlled environment where we could accelerate your development, help you achieve in decades what might otherwise take millennia. Why not just share your technology with us directly? The alien's colors shifted again. Because gifted knowledge is not the same as earned wisdom. Direct technological transfer has destroyed countless promising species. They advance without the ethical framework to handle such power. But adaptation, the incorporation of principles rather than mere replication, that creates true understanding. Sarah processed this revelation, pieces falling into place. The probe we found was meant to be found, Falcon confirmed. When you reach the correct stage of development, the Andromedan ships you perceived as trapped are not our main fleet but volunteer observers, willing to remain here to monitor your progress. And the apparent weapons aimed at Earth. Energy transfer beams designed to activate the lunar facility and provide the power needed for the barrier. We have never intended you harm, Captain Chen. Quite the opposite. Sarah studied the alien emissary, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she asked the question that had been nagging at her since she first saw the Andromedan simulations. What happens now? What do you expect us to do with this? Accelerated evolution. Falcon's form seemed to brighten. Join us. The doorways forming in the barrier are not accidents but gateways, calibrated to your specific molecular structure. They will allow humans, and only humans, to travel beyond this solar system, carrying your unique adaptability to the stars. The universe needs what humanity possesses. We need what you can become. And, if we refuse, if we choose to stay isolated, the choice is yours, the emissary said simply. The barrier will dissolve in 100 of your years, by which time your natural development will have reached the necessary level regardless. We offer acceleration, not coercion. As Sarah returned to Earth with the Andromedan proposal, She carried with her the weight of a decision that would alter humanity's path forever. The quarantine that they had perceived as imprisonment had been protection, a chrysalis rather than a cage. In the command center, as military leaders and scientists gathered to hear her report, Sarah looked at the image of the barrier on the main screen, its pulsing doorways now clearly visible. "They didn't fear us," she told the assembled group. "They hoped for us. They still do." And as humanity stood at this unexpected threshold, the stars beyond suddenly seemed not distant points of light, but beacons, calling them home to a universe that had been waiting for them all along. The revelation of the Andromedans' true intentions sparked fierce debate across Earth. Some embraced the opportunity with open arms, while others remained suspicious, arguing that it could still be an elaborate trap. Nations that had united against a common threat now found themselves divided over a common opportunity. "We need time to consider all implications," the Chinese delegate insisted during the third day of emergency council meetings. "This decision affects all of humanity." "Time is the one thing we now have in abundance," Sarah pointed out. "Even with the accelerated evolution inside the barrier, we don't have to rush our decision." In the weeks that followed, Sarah found herself unexpectedly thrust into the role of humanity's ambassador. She worked closely with Hayes, Foster, and a newly formed international team of scientists studying the barrier and its effects. "The adaptation isn't slowing," Foster reported one morning, 6 weeks after first contact. "If anything, it's becoming more refined, more intentional." Hayes nodded, bringing up a holographic display that would have been impossible to create before the assimilation wave. "It's as if our technology is learning what we need before we even articulate it. The barrier isn't just accelerating our progress, it's somehow attuning itself to human intuition." Sarah studied the simulation of a newly formed gateway near Jupiter's orbit. "Have we tried sending anything through yet?" "Unmanned probes only," General Wilson replied. 3 have gone through successfully, transmitting data from beyond the barrier. The physics out there are identical to here. No distortions, no anomalies. And the Andromedans, still maintaining their position. They've made no attempts to approach Earth again, but they answer all our communications. Sarah had spoken with emissary Falcon several more times since their first meeting. Each conversation revealed more about the Andromedan collective, their history spanning millions of years, their gradual realization that despite their advanced technology, they lacked something crucial for the next evolutionary leap. "Your species creates in ways we cannot comprehend," Falcon had explained during their third meeting. "Where we see patterns, you see possibilities. Where we build on what exists, you imagine what could be." The first human test flight through a gateway was scheduled for the 3-month mark. Unsurprisingly, Sarah volunteered to pilot the mission. "You've become too valuable as our primary contact with the Andromedans," Admiral Thomas objected when she submitted her request. "With respect, sir, that's precisely why it should be me," Sarah countered. "I've established trust. If anything goes wrong, I have the best chance of negotiating a solution." In the end, they couldn't deny her logic. Sarah would lead a team of 3 ships, her own plus Alpha 3 and Alpha 6, piloted by Commander Zhang and Lieutenant Patel, who had both volunteered without hesitation. The night before the mission, Sarah stood alone on the observation deck of the newly constructed Gateway Station, looking down at Earth. From orbit, there was no visible sign of the transformation happening below. Cities still glowed with light as they always had. Oceans still reflected the sun. But humanity was changing in ways that would have been unimaginable just months ago. Medical breakthroughs had eliminated several major diseases. Energy production had become clean and virtually limitless. Food scarcity was on the path to becoming a memory rather than a present reality. And these were just the beginning. "Couldn't sleep either?" Hayes asked, joining her at the viewport. Sarah smiled slightly. "Hard to sleep when you're about to become the first human to travel beyond a mysterious alien barrier." "The probes all came back intact," he reminded her. All readings normal. I know. But probes don't have instincts. She turned to face him. Richard, what if they're wrong about us? What if we're not what they think we are? Hayes considered this. Maybe that's the point. Maybe what they value most is that we don't follow predictable patterns. We surprise them. We surprise ourselves. The next morning, as Sarah guided her ship toward the Jupiter Gateway, she felt none of the fear that had accompanied their desperate mission against the Andromedan fleet. This time, she flew with purpose rather than desperation. Gateway approach vector locked, she reported. All systems nominal. We're right behind you, Captain. Commander Zhang confirmed from Alpha 3. The gateway itself was beautiful, a pulsing ring of energy that somehow looked both perfectly engineered and organically grown. As Sarah's ship approached, the energy patterns shifted, responding to their presence. It's adjusting to our specific molecular structure, she realized, just as Thalcon said it would. Taking a deep breath, Sarah guided her ship forward into the shimmering portal. For a brief moment, everything seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, a sensation that her mind registered but couldn't quite process. Then sudden clarity as her ship emerged on the other side. Transit complete, she reported, checking her instruments. Position confirmed. We're beyond the barrier. The stars looked the same, but Sarah felt the difference immediately. They were truly in interstellar space now, no longer contained within the Sol system's protective bubble. Alpha 3 and Alpha 6 status, she called. Successful transit, both pilots confirmed in succession. Before they could begin their planned survey, Sarah's sensors detected an approaching vessel, much larger than the diplomatic ship she had met before, but clearly Andromedan in design. Captain Chen. Thalcon's familiar mental voice greeted her. You have taken your first step into a larger universe. Just a test flight, Sarah replied modestly. We're still deciding as a species what comes next. Of course. But the fact that you are here at all confirms what we have hoped. Come, there is something I wish to show you. The Andromedan vessel led them further out, to a position where they could see something that took Sarah's breath away. A massive construction in space, a structure so vast it dwarfed anything humans had ever built. It appeared to be a network of interconnected rings, similar to the gateways, but on a scale that boggled the mind. What is it? She asked. The beginning of the solution, Thalcon replied. A network that will eventually span galaxies, allowing instantaneous travel between points of space that would otherwise take millions of years to reach. We have been building it for thousands of your years, but we have reached the limits of our capabilities. The network requires adaptation, growth, evolution. It requires humanity. Sarah understood then what the Andromedans truly wanted, not just human assistance but human creativity, our unique ability to see possibilities where others saw only patterns. The network wasn't just for travel, it was part of their solution to the universe's eventual entropy, a way to connect isolated pockets of order across the expanding void. When Sarah and her team returned through the gateway, they'd brought back not just scientific readings, but a profound new understanding of humanity's potential place in the cosmos. 6 months after the barrier's creation, the United Nations voted to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Andromedan Collective. 1 year after, the first joint human Andromedan research team was formed, focusing on gateway technology. 5 years later, humanity had established permanent settlements on Mars, Europa, and Titan, using adapted Andromedan principles to create sustainable habitats. And 10 years to the day after the Nebraska farmer found a strange probe in his cornfield, Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Horizon, Earth's first true interstellar vessel. As captain of humanity's flagship, she would lead the first official diplomatic mission beyond the Sol system. Ready for departure, Captain, Lieutenant Commander Park reported from the tactical station. She had insisted on joining the mission, along with Hayes and Foster, now chief science officers. Gateway coordinates locked in, the navigator confirmed. Sarah took a moment to appreciate the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as an apparent invasion had transformed into the greatest opportunity humanity had ever known. The quarantine that was actually protection. The fear that was actually hope. "Captain," Hayes prompted gently. "The Andromedan delegation is ready to escort us." Sarah nodded, her decision made. "Take us through." As the horizon passed through the gateway, leaving the Sol system behind, Sarah thought about the title of the report she had submitted after her first meeting with Falcon. Why the Andromedans fear the Sol system. She had kept the title despite learning the truth, because in a way it remained accurate. The Andromedans had feared what humanity might become if we remained isolated, developing in unpredictable ways without guidance. But that same unpredictability, that same adaptive potential that had caused concern, was now the very reason they reached out to us. In humanity, they had found not an enemy to contain, but a partner to nurture. Not a threat to fear, but a hope to embrace. As the gateway closed behind them, and the stars of distant systems came into view, Sarah Chen finally understood the true nature of humanity's place in the universe. We were not conquerors or explorers or even survivors. We were catalysts, and the universe had been waiting for us all along.